Thank you. Thank you guys all for having me here today and for coming in this morning. I think as the media, and especially as the media that has been reporting Syria, my colleagues and I are constantly having these discussions, and we're wondering, where did we go wrong? Because how is it that you can have a conflict like Syria, where you have so much information out there, where you have so many visuals that are out there, where the story is known in every single little heartbreaking component that exists, and still, despite all of it, it feels as if we have been unable to change the narrative, to change the direction, to wake up whatever sort of moral compass that exists that would allow key players to put aside their own politics or personal agendas or broader agendas and actually help out a population that is suffering things that many of us can't even imagine. And Patricia was talking about having to report these two extremes. Every single person who we meet, every single activist who we talk to, every single piece of video that we watch with people with children whose names we're probably not going to know is a story that merits all of our attention. But there isn't the space to tell it. And unfortunately, the reality of the world we live in today, with so much information that's out there to the point of near saturation, is that a simple headline of, refugee communities need your help does not get the public's attention to the degree that a headline of 5 children crushed under the rubble does. And even when you have the attention on 5 children crushed under the rubble, what more does that actually bring? And there is a discussion that merits being had about what is the public's response? What is our individual response to all of these headlines? And why is it that we don't pay attention to certain headlines when they're out there? I'm sure all of you have heard about what's been happening in Ghouta in Syria. And on Friday, again, I was filing a report on what took place there with video that had been filmed inside. And I remember I was thinking to myself, how many times do we have to see these images over and over again? That gray body being pulled out from underneath the rubble, that child covered in dust, and the only bit of color on them is that trickle of red blood. What is it actually going to take? A few weeks ago, I was in Idlib province, and it was right after earlier this month, this period of a week that back then had actually been categorized as one of the deadliest in the Syrian conflict, of course, to be later on superseded by what happened in Ghouta. But we were in Idlib, and we went to a number of the hospitals that had just been bombed. And one of the hospitals wasn't just servicing emergency cases, it was actually the largest hospital. So it also had a maternity ward with a lot of babies who were in incubators at the time that it had been struck. Luckily, they were able to get the children out, the babies out. But one mother who I met was talking about how she grabbed her baby from the incubator, wrapped it in blankets, and just ran and didn't know where to go. And the only thing that she said to me was, please, in your report, please, 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 just tell them to stop bombing the hospitals. And then she said, do you think they're going to listen? And I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't say, yes, people are going to listen, or yes, people are going to care. Outside of the hospital that had been bombed, I also met a doctor who didn't at that point in time want to go on camera. And he watched us filming, and he said, what words are you going to use to describe what's happening here? Do you even have them? It's like, I don't have words anymore. And I think I actually lost my words a long time ago. And I said this before, and I said this in my last report, and I'll say it again. I think we're at a point where we're probably going to have to create new words to describe and fully encompass what has happened in Syria and our failure when it comes to Syria. And I know a lot of people in this room go through the same sense of despair and what do we do, and it's too overwhelming, and I am exhausted because we all try so hard and we fight so hard on so many different levels, and sometimes it is hard to wake up in the morning and get over the sense that everything is just so overwhelmingly suffocating. And when I start feeling that way, I remember the story of this little boy named Yusuf. I met Yusuf back in 2007 in Iraq. He was 5 years old, and masked men had, for reasons that are still unknown, doused him in gasoline as he was playing in front of his house and set him on fire. When his father brought Yusuf into our office, having gone to every single ministry, every single hospital he could access, looking for follow-on care for his little boy. He thought, I'll try my luck with the media. And he brought little Yusuf in, and Yusuf was so angry, was so uncommunicative, was so sullen, and his face was a frozen mask of just rivers of scar tissue. He sat in our kitchen in the Baghdad bureau and he was eating rice, one grain at a time, because the scar tissue prevented his mouth from opening, so he just shoved it in like that. At this point in time, Iraq was also no longer in the headlines. People had turned away. They were tired of hearing about the war. They were tired of hearing about the casualties, and we did not know what we could actually do for Yusuf except tell his story. And we were all very nervous about it. And then all of a sudden the story went out on air, and it was amazing. It was brilliant. I mean, it still gives me goosebumps. Viewers responded from around the world. People wanted to help. This little boy somehow broke through all of the apathy that existed. And his story broke boundaries, nationalities, ethnicities, transcended all of this and brought people together to want to help him out. An organization in Los Angeles ended up picking up the case. CNN viewers donated hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Yusuf went to America with his family and was able to start what was and is still an ongoing continuation of a series of surgeries and support systems. And I've stayed in touch with the family. I see them regularly. And the last time I saw Yusuf, he's now 15. He still wants to be a doctor, by the way, because he wants to give back in the way that he's seen so much being given to him. But what's most striking to me right now about Yusuf's story is that at 15, he doesn't remember the attack anymore. He knows what happened to him, but he doesn't have his own memories of it anymore. He doesn't remember the anger, the pain, everything it is that he went through. His first memories are of the kindness that people showed him, of the kindness of strangers. And that right now is what defines him. His narrative changed, his life narrative changed because people were actually able to come together. And what that taught me and showed me is that even in my most cynical of moments, there is something out there called the kindness of strangers. Even when we feel most powerless, we're actually not. There is something that all of us can do every single day. And it was that sort of thinking that then led me to start my own nonprofit, INARA, because throughout the course of my journalism, I met a lot of Yusufs, where sometimes the story doesn't generate help, or where you can't tell a story. But I have a network, I know people, we can bring people together, and we can come together, and what we do is we focus specifically on kids who need life-saving or life-altering medical assistance that no one else provides. So we just build a network, and we try to actually support the institutions that are out there and help these families navigate what is oftentimes an overwhelming medical system for them to try to get through, especially when they're living as refugees and especially when they're having to deal with wounded children. And the other thing that INARA has also showed me is how much it means to a refugee family to just know that someone's going to pick up the phone, to just know that there's somebody there, to just know that they have this fundamental support system. And I also realize that as cynical as I am, and I do see the ups and downs of the funding when it comes through to INARA, and I do know that every single organization has struggled with funding for Syria from the very beginning. I also see how important it is to keep fighting, because we live in a world today where governments will most likely continue to fail. And that is where we have to keep fighting that much harder so that we don't fail each other, because we have the information. We just need to struggle to keep acting on it and fighting for it. And for that, I actually want to thank all of you for being here today, and for listening and for caring and for doing what it is that you're doing. So thank you.